Welcome to another session. I hope you are well. In today's session, I'd like to talk about your immunological energy expenditure and how this relates to and is correlated with the risks that most people face with regards to fatigue, anxiety, and depression. Just to recap, in the session I covered previously, I made reference to the importance of iodine and vitamin C. Let me expand on that slightly. Today's session, my focus really is how do you place and position and put the body in a state where it's fit enough to deal with any immunological demands, energy demands related to immunological needs, and therefore reduces the risk that you have autoimmune issues or allergy issues. Now, my go-to is iodine and vitamin C. This is a salt pipe. The salt pipe, in the session I covered previously, I took 15% Lugos iodine solution. I put 2 drops in this salt pipe, stirred it, and I inhale iodine. There are 3 ways for iodine to be consumed. You can inhale iodine because iodine is very volatile. As soon as you inhale it, it goes through the various passage systems and contact kills any toxins, bacteria, fungi, and more that it comes in contact with. The second way of using iodine is to take 1 part of iodine and mix it with 10 parts of coconut oil. That would then create what we call iodine oil. That can then be applied where needed to various parts of the body. If you have skin irritations, eczema, or things like that, you can apply that and it will contact kill on the skin any issues, any scabs or whatever you might have. The third way is to consume it. Let me make it very clear. This is 15% solution, Lugos iodine. You take 2 drops in about 1 liter of water, and you drink that. In many ways, sometimes my preference will be before bedtime. You may not be able to drink 1 liter of water at that time. The quantity of water can be reduced. Sometimes I only use a very small quantity of water. In today's session, I'm not going to go into how iodine is connected to your thyroid glands and how it helps and facilitates the production of the right levels of thyroxine and free T4, etc., 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 and how it functions with your pituitary gland. I'm not going to go into that, but I would simply suggest iodine contact kills all microbes. Vitamin C contact kills all microbes. You shouldn't take both of them at the same time because they counteract each other. So I would take vitamin C during the day, first thing in the morning, all through the day, and stop at roughly maybe about 5 p.m. with the idea that sometime around 9, I take iodine before bedtime. But vitamin C is such a powerful drug, and it's like an all-round supplement. 5 grams every day if you are already, you might say, in ketosis, or if you are on a PK diet and your gut function is working well. Otherwise, sometimes more. You take it to bowel tolerance, and the whole point being that actually the body absorbs as much as it needs to fight all the microbes and to fight all the infections and the toxicity in your body, and whatever it does not need. At that point, you'll be at bowel tolerance, and you either fart it out or you actually do a number 2. The key thing is actually, if you want to put your body in a fit state, you need to know what to take and the lifestyle to lead. Iodine inhaled treats all upper and lower respiratory infections, whether it's acute or whether it's chronic. This is just, the idea that we don't actually talk to people about this is mind-blowing. It's been given a bad rep, no problem, to each their own. But I found if you have and this may not apply to everyone, but 99% of the time, for most people, for the average person who has got respiratory issues, it does the business. Just inhale it, using a salt pipe. The second way to keep your body in a fit state, once you've gone through the process of taking iodine and taking vitamin C on a daily basis, 5 to 10 grams per day, sometimes even much more. In the session I covered previously, I made reference to the fact that I've been over the festive season, for the 3 days after I returned, and I was back in work, I was taking about 30 to 40 grams of vitamin C every day, 5 grams every single hour, and I could not get to bowel tolerance. I increased it to 10 grams, and I could not get to bowel tolerance. Today, it's gone up to 50 grams, and I think I've started to get the symptoms and signs that I may be approaching bowel tolerance. What this indicated was that I was carrying a very high infectious load, interacting with family and friends and loved ones, traveling, exposing myself. My body's immune system is under attack, which means I'm using so much energy. The second way you can avoid or trying to put the body in a fit state is actually to avoid vaccinations. The HPV vaccine is pernicious for its ability to place the body in a state whereby the body actually goes into a malfunction, and therefore your immune system is not working as it should. You also want to avoid, in addition to vaccinations, prescription drugs, social drugs. All of these, except where absolutely necessary, and I'm speaking with respect to prescription drugs. It could be that you're taking antibiotics and you're taking drugs that actually have in them certain chemicals and certain materials that allow your body to switch on its immunological, you might say, standing army, and therefore your body's burning more energy than it needs. The third is air pollution. Smoking, being around places where you discharge or discharge of products from combustion, and sometimes nasty products of combustion, it's not good for your body. Exposure to pesticides, for some people who live around power stations, chemical plants, cement work, cement plants, oil refineries, all of these have high risks of cancer, cardiovascular diseases, even birth defects. All of this matter. So with regards to immunological need, and the fact that some people in the UK, the number is up to 50, between 50 and 65%, going on 70% of most people in the West, particularly the UK, have an autoimmune or an allergy issue. Most of it is based on lifestyle. Some of it is based on, you might say, genes. Some might say genetics, epigenetics. But there's an environmental aspect. The more we expose ourselves to pollution, the more our body is being triggered into a state whereby our immune system is malfunctioning. Number 4 is the people who actually have dental amalgams, especially those who have things like mercury that is included as part of that dental surgical process. Mercury evaporates. For people who don't know, I was stunned when I learned about this. Mercury evaporates from dental amalgam. And what happens is that we inhale, once it's actually evaporated, we inhale that into our brain. Now, the hallmark for that is Alzheimer's diseases. This is horrendous. So there are things that we are doing to our body without knowing. There are things we're putting in our body and ingesting that we do not know. The hope of today's session is to bring to your attention things that you should put in the body. You should inhale vitamin C and iodine, and things you should avoid: vaccines, prescription drugs, social drugs, polluting compounds and items, dental amalgams, if you will. Even number 5 of them is mycotoxins. Most of the buildings in the UK are period or older buildings. Within the area of the group that we call period buildings, we have a huge amount of buildings that are old, and therefore we have issues with rising damp in some houses, lack of proper insulation in other houses, leaks from the roof in some houses, and therefore we have what we call water damaged buildings. We then have a breeding ground for mold. As a matter of fact, more than 90% of those who suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, usually test positive for the mycotoxins from water damage buildings. In other words, mold. So if you're struggling with anxiety, depression, you find you've got low energy, your immune system doesn't seem to function, look around the house you live in, look around the area you work. If you work in an environment that is well ventilated, there are, perhaps I should have done this in today's session, I should have brought my moisture meter. I use this for building surveys. I also use this for the fireplace. You know, if you were going to put wood in fire, you can test the moisture content of the wood. You can walk around spaces if you're inspecting a building, and you can test the various surface construction types and see how much moisture is in the wall or in that construction material. It might be useful to get one of those. They're very cheap, and go around your bedroom and just put it on the wall, test the wall, touch the various construction materials. Now, one of the issues has to do with where you have wallpapers, because I tend to find that the risk of mold is more pernicious in houses that have wallpapers, because the moisture and the water and the mold can actually hide behind the layer of the wallpaper. For those that have normal walls, it makes life easier. But go around your house and just make observations to see whether you are in a water damaged building, and recognize that that has a huge effect on your health and well-being. Now, prescription drugs is one that and social drugs is one that I try not to talk about very much, because obviously I'm not a medical professional, I'm not giving advice here. And therefore, for some people, there is a medical reason why you've been given a prescription medication. You should seek counsel as to whether the medication you're taking is doing more harm than good, or if it's doing more good than harm. Social drugs, on the other hand, is something we tend to do and use as a way of masking or hiding something that we know to be true. We have low energy, we take energy drinks. We take caffeine. For some people, we take social drugs, cocaine, and more. As with most things, moderation is the key word. But there are some items and drugs that are not pure, and therefore, when mixed by the people who distribute and sell them, you may be inhaling something that is not good for you as a person. And therefore, I would recommend, rather than mask what you know to be true, which is a lack of energy delivery, a lack of energy production, and perhaps a lack of being socially nuanced in your interactions with people, develop the ability to be a communicator, someone who can stand and sit with people and share your perspectives without relying on an enhanced drug to give you that confidence. Now, non-organic food is something, if you can, and most people cannot because of the costs or the difficulty in sourcing, it should be avoided, partly because most non-organic foods use a lot of pesticides. Glyphosate is the most pernicious of all, as we know today, but it's used so widely with regards to food and growing crop. And therefore, most of the food we eat contains pesticides. And we should avoid as much as we can, because it creates and triggers all these internal reactions with regards to autoimmunity, allergy, and toxicity within the body. There are things like electromagnetic radiation, things like the use of foreign metals in the body. This applies to women in this instance. The use of silicone used in surgeries for any form of implantation or enhancement or cosmetic surgery has its unintended consequences. I'll just leave it at that, because this is not a session for that. But in addition to that, even surgeries that require the use of metals can be incredibly damaging to the individual. We have things like nickel, we have things like cobalt, we have things like chromium that in the body does so much damage, and again should be avoided. Remember, the key focus is what are the things we should avoid to ensure that we're not placing the body in a state where it's always at an energy disadvantage by virtue of the fact that our immunological demand is too high? How do we put the body in a fit state? I would even go as far as saying even cosmetics and perfumes, hair dyes. Yes, there are opportunities for compounds that are more organic and more natural, like henna, but most do more harm to us, because when sprayed on the body absorbs a lot of the chemicals. As a matter of fact, if you took your perfume bottle and you looked at the oils that were stated on the perfume bottle or the dyes, most people would be shocked if they did the research to understand what each of those items stood for and what their composition were. I still love perfumes. I've been trying to wean myself out of perfumes, but I still love them. What I have been doing, however, is rather than spray the perfumes and the very thick oiled perfumes on my skin, I've gone for the option of actually trying to spray it on the clothes a short while before I wear them, so that it has time to evaporate, and I still smell good, but I'm not actually creating any risk that some of those compounds are being absorbed directly by my skin. So I would recommend that you minimize any risk of exposure by being careful about the type of, there are natural perfumes and there are natural dyes and there are natural products that we can buy, cosmetics that we can use that reduce the risk, or rather that do not increase the likelihood that we are injecting things that are foreign and not good for our body into our precious little body. VOCs I've covered in the two sessions prior, when I talked about using heat as a regime to remove VOCs from our body, way of detoxifying and removing any volatile organic compounds from our skin, which sits in the subcutaneous fat, and therefore with heat they come to the surface, we sweat them out, and we wash off the sweat, and therefore we halve our toxic load the more we expose ourselves to heating regimes, whether that be infrared saunas, normal traditional saunas, sitting in the sun, plain exercise, or even sitting in a hot bath. All of those things help by virtue of heat, which something I will cover at some point is the whole concept of fourth phase water, or the exclusion zone water, which helps in that process of ensuring the body moves into a negatively charged state, and therefore helps us secrete, either by urinating or sweating out what is positive, or protons, and therefore creating this exclusion zone and intensifying fourth phase water availability within the body. The final one is toxic metals. I've covered a number of things in today's session. I may have covered it very poorly, but the point was, and the point of today's message was to say that, the famous saying, "It's not my father, not my mother, but it's me, your Lord, standing in the need of prayer." There are certain things that we can do as individuals to ensure that we maximize the possibility of success. We reduce the possibility of failure, and we play the hand that we've been given the best we can. Many people are suffering from fatigue, and many people are suffering from depression by virtue of the fact that on the physical side of things, we're asking too much from the body. The body's failing, but a lot of the failure is self-inflicted. It's either based on the fact that we are just not aware of what needs to be done through our lifestyle and how we live, or we're not aware of how the body functions, for example, through the immunological need and the need for energy. If you were to go through the list of what I shared today and you made each one a priority, what you'll find is that very quickly you can reduce your energy requirement and therefore your immunological expenditure, which would mean that you have a surplus of energy as opposed to being in a deficit state of energy. Now, in the sessions to follow, I'm going to talk about the whole energy expenditure, but from a different perspective. We've talked about your immune system, and this is where I start to move and I start to introduce slowly what would be the second phase of this lecture series, which is the mind, psychology, the metaphysical, and then the spiritual. We are emotional creatures. We have an emotional need. The question then becomes, how do we feed and supply this emotional need? When people are happy and charged with joy and a sense of contentness and peace and a void of fear and worry and doubt and scarcity, you find actually that despite their suffering, they find meaning in their suffering and they thrive. But even the emotional buckets that we have and need is energy demanding, because we are obviously irrational creatures. Something happens and we get angry, something happens, we get upset, we carry burdens of people's other, mistakes and shenanigans and people's monkeys in our back, partly because we are emotional creatures, and we're not robots. We do not just act like machines. We have an intellect and we have emotions, and therefore sometimes we carry emotional burdens for generations, for 10, 15 years, and people cannot let go. And because they hold on to those monkeys, they spend more energy. It would be the same thing as me going for a walk, and both of us weighed, assuming you were walking alongside me, and we weighed the same weight in kilograms, but you decided to carry an extra 60, 70 grams on your back. Yeah, it would wear you down eventually. I would feel lighter than you. It wouldn't be because I was stronger than you. It would just be simply because you're carrying more for the journey than I am carrying. It's just a purely numbers game. And on the emotional side, there's certain things we can do to ensure that we're not carrying dead weight that do not edify and help us in the long term. And the question is, how do we even start that process? And how does that connect with energy delivery? That's what I will cover in the session that follows. Now, I hope today's session has been of some value.